Misha is a 4-star ice damage dealer residing in the path of destruction. Being a character with a lower rarity and given away for free during events, he has had wider accessibility than that of premium destruction characters. Despite this benefit, him being useful is an overstatement, and in this video, we're going to take a deep dive into Misha, the character that never saw any amount of usage. Being a character with such a big impact on the story, have a kit as he does, with a role in the metagame that isn't sought after is such a disappointment. Maybe this leaves room for a further discussion about Freeze as a whole in an entirely separate video. Like Hanya, Misha had never had much time in the spotlight of the metagame, and unlike Hanya, he never even got any rep from the community, which given his timing makes a lot of sense. We were still in a destruction heavy meta that featured two characters with consistent damage uptime coupled with high damage multipliers. One of those destruction characters also just received their best in slot offensive buffing character, which created even more of a damage discrepancy. The other destruction character would be the one that Misha found himself competing with, and the results of this competition wasn't even close. Jinglu being a 5-star destruction ice character, a higher rarity than that of Misha, she also had one of the most free-to-play friendly teams in the game, thanks to one of her teammates being an early launch 4-star character, and the present 5-star being a character on the standard banner selector that many players around this time would finally start to unlock. Jinglu also being meta relevant as long as she was, being as dominant as she was, would give the character the high usage she had. There is most certainly other factors that contributed to her successes, but none of which that are worthy to mention, especially without giving somewhat subjective answers, like she's hot and he's not. Anyways, what I'm iterating here is that most players already had Jinglu, and those that didn't have the character would patiently await her rerun and couldn't be bothered with a budget version of the character that again probably wasn't attractive to them. This would mean that what I mentioned about Hanya at least lasting 3 weeks would be the inverse of what Misha experienced, being introduced 3 months too late. In reality, it was like 5 months, but I wanted that to sound more clickbaity. I also remember mentioning that Hanya was released too late in her dedicated video, and that she should have been a launch character, which I still stand by, mind you. We had characters that had issues with skill points early on in the game, and it makes a ton of sense when you factor in Xingxie being a launch character that had poor synergy with most of the launch characters. If Hanya was to release any point after Sparkle, she too would suffer the same fate as Misha, even if she's leagues better as a standalone character. It's just what I iterate in every video. The average player is going to use the best existing option available, which is known as the meta, and that's neither Hanya nor Misha. That's pretty much the consensus of Misha as a damage dealer. But what about the utility of the character via Freeze? Freeze is an interesting mechanic because it allows you to essentially gain more value depending on the team composition. The damage over time characters come to mind as their off-turn damage benefits from the enemy taking turns. If the enemy takes their turn while frozen, they'll take dot damage and delay this action to unfreeze themselves, allowing your dots to proc on the enemy once more for free. However, considering Misha as a destruction character, it's a lot harder to fit him in the already established dot teams, where the foundation stands extremely strong on its own already, such as Ruame and Black Swan being amazing additions to the team composition. The freeze that Misha provides isn't going to outweigh the damage increase and team flexibility in all contents provided by both of those characters. If we were to replace Wo, then you'd lose out on faster ult rotations, less DOT damage, and the comfortability of having a safe defensive option in the team, which many players aren't willing to give up. You also have March Preservation, who already fulfilled that role of freeze and defensive utility anyways, so not being easy to slot in the dot team would give Misha a hard time having any place in an established meta as a utility focused character. In Acheron's dedicated video, we mentioned Misha being able to put a freeze onto the enemy, which is able to give a debuff towards Acheron's ultimate stacks. So he has a place in a team where debuffs are needed, but other characters can also fulfill that role as well. So if there was ever a time where you would need the freeze debuff itself, then he'd become a character that's actually useful in those specific team compositions. But again, we have characters already that do cover that niche of being able to provide a debuff, especially skill point positive ones. These two shortcomings would make Misha a character that was poorly received on his debut, with no room of having any sort of usage among the general player base. While he may not be the worst damage dealer ever, because at the very least he doesn't actually kill himself during combat, he still does suffer from pre-existing options in an established meta that are just way too dominant. Even if he was released in a meta where Jinglu hadn't existed, he would have had to compete with other damage dealers who weren't lagging too far behind her. It also becomes even more apparent that we're in now a meta of damage dealers that quite literally ignores the elemental weaknesses of the enemy, which makes every character versatile. So in the modern day metagame, does Misha have any place in any team comp? While a Super Break team works virtually for every character in the game, he would then be competing for a spot in the team against Well for the niche playstyle. Well has a unique interaction with Super Break, which delays the enemy's action, and Well is known to delay that action even more with the reduction of speed, even immobilizing the enemy with the imaginary imprisonment effect. This will mean that the freeze Misha brings to the Super Break team comp feels more obsolete. And I do want to save the rest of this conversation for Welt's dedicated video, so we'll just leave it there. Misha most definitely feels like a character released too late, or too early. I'll explain later in the video. While we can't say that some 4 stars feel somewhat timeless, even those characters find themselves outclassed by premium options. It's also no longer an excuse either when you factor in characters like Gallagher existing at a point where he wasn't considered best in slot until the release of a later character that allows him to be the best at what he does as a defensive option for the break teams. You know, Firefly and planting fire weakness. Even he is going to fall victim to the same scenario with the release of Misha, but that's already a video in the making. Now what if Freeze was to receive the Super Break treatment sometime in the future? We could see the rise of Misha at some point. I mean, compared to other damage dealers of the ice element, they have no way of being able to apply freeze to an enemy without breaking their weakness. This will mean that, much like the uptick in usage XY saw following their introduction of the Harmony MC, we could see similar circumstances for the Misha himself. The problem then lies with how exactly would you shape the metagame around freeze? Do you just make enemies even faster than they currently are? This would make Super Break less dominant as the enemies have faster speeds, resulting in them recovering from the broken state faster. This would also make damage over time better in a sense as the enemies take more actions over the course of the fight, resulting in more off-turn damage. And you would lastly see the interaction of the dot with the freeze debuff feel a lot more impactful than it is in its current iteration. Or they could just pull a Hoyo classic and implement a super freeze which makes enemies take more damage while they're frozen. This would in turn give Misha the XY treatment and make the dot characters feel better as well. Who knows what the future may hold. But as of right now, Misha is a relic of the past. Much like Natasha and Hanya, Misha is used by no one. Now, once again, he's a character that has never had a time to shine in Honkai style meta, and unlike Arlen, he has the tools to do essentially something no other character already does, but who knows when his kit is going to be actually useful. As of right now, in Honkai Star's current metagame, there is no place for this character. Thank you for watching, and have a nice rest of your day.